Welcome to EdVantage. I'm your host, David Young, and I hope you're having a good week. Things have been good for me. It's spring, and spring, as you know, is hiring season in education. So, like many of you, I'm planning to get started hiring in the next few weeks. So, that's really what's been on my mind in the last week or so. I hope you've had the same experience. I have been so blessed to be able to hire really talented staff members. But like in any organization, when you hire talented staff members, you only have them sometimes for a while because they get other opportunities, and that's okay. I believe if you can get a super talented person for just a year or 2 or 3 years, then kids, and in my case at a regional cooperative, our districts benefit from that. So a big part of leadership is hiring talented people, helping them develop their skills and expertise, and then cheering them on to bigger things. So those when they go on to those opportunities, those leave openings, and that's what I'm looking at right now. But we've talked about this before on EdVantage. I believe hiring is the single most important thing that we do as leaders, and it always makes me excited about the possibilities, the new expertise and skill sets that the next person will bring in. So as you look forward to hiring your new staff, I hope you look at it with that same excitement and anticipation. And if you're looking for some guidance, I would encourage you to check out EdVantage episode 9. It's called Hiring for Talent with Superintendent Mike LaFavors. And not to toot my own horn about this episode, but I enjoyed it so much. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from principals and superintendents about how they use that episode as a tutorial with their own hiring committees, because it's a different way of not necessarily looking so much for skill, but looking for these God-given talents that people bring in, and then supporting them after you hire them. So if you're looking to brush up on your hiring skills, I encourage you to check that out. So I'm excited to get going with our episode today. It's a big one. I've been looking forward to it. I even did a social media post last week about it in anticipation of it. My guest today is an extremely influential voice in education and educational leadership, really across the nation. And I know he does some things across the world in other countries. I think a lot of you may already know him. I'm joined today by Will Parker. So let me tell you a little bit about Will. William D. Parker is the founder of Principal Matters, LLC, an educator, author, speaker, and executive coach who leverages his expertise in school culture, leadership, and communication to equip educators with strategies for motivating students, inspiring teachers, and reaching communities. He's also the host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, which has more than 1.5 million downloads to date. And that's why I think you may already know him. Will supports schools around the world through professional development and leadership coaching. He frequently presents at K through 12 events, education conferences, leadership team training, and graduate classes on effective practices, organizational management, and improved school communication. Will is an Oklahoma educator since 1993. He was named South Intermediate High School Teacher of the Year for Broken Arrow Public Schools in 1998. He became an assistant principal in 2004 and was named Oklahoma Assistant Principal of the Year by the National Association of Secondary Principals in 2012. As a principal of a Title I school, he helped lead initiatives in collaboration, remediation, and mentoring that significantly improved student achievement. For 6 years, Will served as the executive director of the Oklahoma Association of Secondary School Principals and the Oklahoma Middle Level Education Association. Now, in addition to being a podcast host, you heard some other things in the bio there, but Will is also the author of several books, including Principal Matters, Messaging Matters, Pause, Breathe, Flourish, and then his most recent book that we're going to talk about today, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love. Now, I've been listening to the Principal Matters podcast for quite a while now. I've been reading Will's work as well. And I'll be honest, I've learned a lot from him already. I'm really excited about what we can learn from him today. Will's insights and advice are always practical, sincere, and rooted in proven leadership practices. So I really think we're going to have a great conversation today. So, with that, Will Parker, welcome to the podcast.
David Young, this is so fun. Before we started recording, you and I spent so much time laughing and sharing stories about growing up on farms and being school leaders. I feel like I've already had a show with you before we even got this one going, but thank you for that kind introduction. And it's just great to be here. Let me think. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think you covered it all. I'll just say, from the Family Guy perspective, I'm the husband to Missy for 32 years, and we've got four adult children, three daughters and a son. And man, I'm so grateful for all of them. So yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Very good. And still living in Oklahoma, correct?
Yeah, we live just north of Tulsa in Owasso, Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, we should tell the listeners, though, you grew up, a lot of our listeners, not all, we have listeners from all over, but several are from Kentucky, where I'm from, and you grew up where?
I grew up in Paris, Tennessee, so just south of Murray, Kentucky, and so Northwest Tennessee is my homeland. My grandparents were farmers there. My dad and mom owned land right beside my grandparents' place, and we still have that property. Both my parents have passed, but my oldest brother farms and lives there, so we still get to go back home. David, my kids look forward to Christmas so much every year. It's like Disney World to them, just to be able to get outside and just, you know how it is, just get outside and ramble and roam through the woods and down the roads and in creeks. And Jack loves to go deer hunting. So Tennessee's still a dear place to me. And I love Kentucky too.
Well, that's we know down around Kentucky Lake and
Hmm.
land between the lakes. It's just such a beautiful area down there. What a great place to grow up.
Hmm.
So, Will, let me ask a little bit. I kind of went through your journey there, and it struck me that as you went through your journey in education, at first it was sort of a traditional route. You were
Hmm.
a teacher, you were an assistant principal, then you were a principal. But then after that, you did some really cool things. And not that those three things are not cool, but you took a little bit of a different route. You became a director of a statewide principal organization. And then you shared with me the last time we talked, you started a blog, which led to a podcast, which led to being an author and a consultant, a trainer, a keynote speaker, all those types of things. So you've packed a lot into your career so far. So I wonder any background you want to give us there, but I'm specifically interested in were there any over that time, any consistent like motivations or passions that have been sort of a common thread as you've gone through that journey?
What a great question, David. So to answer that question, I want to take you back to when I was in college. Um, I'll take you back before that. When I was in high school, I did not want to go to college. My dad was in the military, but also we lived on the farm. And I just never could quite wrap my mind around like that whole traditional college education pathway. But I actually was chopping wood one day on the farm when I got an injury. I ended up I was using the wrong wedge and I got a piece of metal in the left wrist that cut a tendon. And so I was unable to work. And so in working was my thing. I actually used to dive for shells in the Kentucky Lake area when I wasn't working on the farm. And so because I was disabled for 6 weeks, my mom invited me to come down and spend every day with her working part-time at a daycare where she was the director. And it was during that time where I was kind of trapped. I couldn't work. I was helping her with these kids. Man, I started taking some long walks in the fields behind our house and just praying. And I just felt in those long walks that maybe I should reconsider, going to college and doing something that, the whole, what happens when you can't work. You're like, oh my gosh, maybe I need to consider other options that happen. And so I reluctantly enrolled in school, went to college, majored in language arts, actually majored in English education because I'd always loved to read. And that was always my favorite course in high school. Education was the minor because it was just a practical application to it. But David, even through my time as a college student, I never really thought I'd be a teacher. I would sit in those classes and I would think, I'm probably going to do something different, or I'd like to live overseas. I'd like to do this, maybe ministry. I thought about all these other things. And so even as education student, I always was looking at everything I was learning through the lens of this would work in a classroom, but where else would it work?
Hmm.
And so when I became a teacher, what I discovered was, I don't know, for some reason that mindset's always been a part of me, which is I love what I'm doing right now, but where else could I use this skill set or this practice? And I think I've been that way my whole life. That every role I've ever served in, whether it's teaching, administration, state executive, so I'm now a full-time consultant. I'm always looking at the work I'm doing through a couple of different lenses. But I think the common thread for me has just been how do I take whatever it is, the skill set, the content, the standards, the goals, the safety, all the things that are involved in the work that we do. But how do I make sure that the common thread for me is providing the most value to the people right in front of me? How can I help somebody right in front of me discover something they've never discovered before, learn something new that could change the way that they think and behave, apply that in a way that suddenly, hopefully, transforms their applications, behaviors, understandings. Because I just want to, and I know this sounds so Pollyannish, but I really do. I want to make the world a better place by every person that gets to spend time with me. And so that's a value I've just held on to, which is whether that's with kids, with adults, in small groups and big groups, whether it's just a one-on-one. So I don't know. That's probably the easiest way for me to say a common thread that's been a part of everything I've done is just how can I provide the most value wherever God places me.
Well, I love that, and I know we're going to talk about your book in a second, but in your book, you talk about education for most of us being a calling, being something that we feel led to do and led to serve others. What I love about the way you describe that, though, is that's a very creative way of thinking. Like that really is thinking outside the box right off the bat in every situation. And I know that's a common theme in your book. Whose permission are you waiting for? So I appreciate you sharing that. Um, so a lot of our listeners are principals and district administrators, some superintendents and teachers as well. So I want to talk specifically about school leaders because I know your podcast is Principal Matters, and I know you have folks who used to be principals or want to be principals who also listen, but the core audience is principals. And you've been coaching school leaders for quite a while now. So I'd like to pose two scenarios to you. Um, if you were sitting right now with a relatively new principal, what are some key tips or pointers that you might give him or her? And then the second question, the follow up is, what if it was an experienced principal? Would the advice be different or would it be similar?
Okay, so for that new principle, and maybe they will be similar, but we'll see. I would say, first and foremost, give yourself the grace to realize you'll not do this perfectly. I think I was so concerned about making mistakes and doing it right when I was a young leader that I probably overthought things. I think in some ways I even felt paralyzed at first because I just was like, am I making the right decisions and am I doing the right things? And the truth is that just like in that first year of teaching or the first year you do anything, you learn through doing. So most likely, if you're at the place where you've been able to hold the degree and get the certification and be invited to do this work and you've got experience in the past, you have what it takes. But you also need the experience to learn the things you don't already know. So by the end of a first year, you're going to have a whole calendar of things you've experienced that you can now refer back to as a roadmap for the year that's coming. So that's one thing is just give yourself grace. Number two is really pour yourself into relationship building. I always say that, especially when you're stepping into a new leadership role, the most important thing you can do is establish trust with the people you're serving. And by everyone, I mean everyone: students, teachers, staff, paraprofessionals, custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers. You just go down the list. Anyone that's you're going to be interacting with that's going to be affecting the work that you do with students, parents, community members, stakeholders, get to know them. And so for me, because I remember when I transitioned from AP to the school, I became AP at another school where I eventually became the principal. But being brand new to that community, man, when I stepped into those first few days, that's what I did. I just went around getting to know people. And I would do that at the beginning of every school year too, though, because there's always new people to get to know. But it's really established those relationships. And then three, just something that's really practical. I wish somebody had told me this is pull out your calendar in advance of the school year and just put everything on there that you know is coming up in advance, whether it's drills, safety procedures, ball games you're covering, but also go ahead and start blocking out times each week that you would want to be in teachers' classrooms, observing and evaluating. Don't wait until the last minute to figure that out. Block those things in advance on your schedule so that you're not allowing the either the chaos or the urgent to completely consume everything that you're doing. So that when you are managing a problem or you're helping resolve a situation, as soon as that's finished, you can get back to what's already on the calendar as a priority. So those are some things I would say to new leaders. And then for experienced leaders, David, I think it's important to ask yourself the question, especially as you're growing a culture and growing a staff and you're growing in the work and maybe you're feeling established, is am I consistently and intentionally making sure that I'm reflecting with the people whom I'm serving so that I'm hearing from them how this is going? Because you can start putting some blinders on when you've done work for a while where you assume you know what's going on, but maybe you need to reconnect with people that are doing the work regularly. So I will, one of the things I would ask an experienced leader is show me on your calendar where you're intentionally spending time with a circle of other leaders that are really guiding the work that's going on. Your core leaders. Some people call those guiding coalitions. Sometimes that's just an admin team. Sometimes in a small school, it may just be a principal and a counselor and one other person or whatever. But who's that core team you're meeting with regularly? And then let's expand it. How often are you pulling your staff and faculty together so you can hear from them and get reflections from them? But in addition, how often are you meeting with your students? Like, do you have a student leadership group that's guiding and giving you feedback? Because I would highly recommend thinking about how to invite students in. I have a good friend who's a principal at Palo Alto High School in Palo Alto, California, Brent Klein. He has every year he has his students. Now he's been doing this for a while. He has the students apply to be on his student guidance team. And then he interviews students at the beginning of the year, and then he'll select a handful from each class, and they become his guiding coalition of student guidance that he meets with monthly too. And then the same thing with how are you regularly connecting with parents? So I think for experienced leaders, because you've got a lot of the systems and operations parts figured out, I think it's really important that you're keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the people you're serving by intentionally spending the time with them to hear, reflect, and then apply. So those are some suggestions I would give, David.
Well, so to reflect on that, I think it's interesting that all of those things for experience principles really tie back to taking control of your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we know as principals, I've been there where I felt like I was putting out fires all day. And I went home tired and felt like I had done, the best I could do and had done a good job, but I hadn't gotten anything done that I had planned to do. And
Mm-hmm.
every now and then you're going to have a day like that. But if most of your days are like that, you end up working really, really hard, but it's difficult to move your school forward like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, in order to be proactive, to get into teachers' classrooms, to meet with students, to meet with teachers, to have leadership team meetings where you're keeping your finger on the pulse. Those are all things that you have to be proactive about, because if you don't have the slots, somehow when you get those things on your calendar, it typically works out to where you can do those. But if they aren't on your calendar, your day just fills up every day.
Yeah, I call it switch your focus. So I think it was the 2018 Olympics. I was watching a cross country ski competition, and Simon Kruger, it was the name of the skier that I was watching because he fell down as soon as the race started. And I was like, oh man, poor guy, because everybody's tumbling over him, and all the racers take off, and he's in the very back, brushing off all the snow. And I remember thinking, poor this guy, he went all the way to the Olympics, and he's like, there goes his race. And I don't know if you've ever watched cross country skiing, but they race forever. Like a couple of hours later, I'm back in the room and I notice there's Simon Kruger. And he's at the front of the race, and he's like, here he is barreling through the tape, and he's the winner. And so they're interviewing him afterwards, and they're like, "How did you go from falling in the snow to winning the gold medal?" And I'm gonna misquote which country he's from, so I won't even say it's a Scandinavian country, but he said in English, "I switched my focus. I was in the snow, and when I got up, I thought, how do I have to now switch my focus to getting back in the front so I can cross that finish line first." And I don't know why, David, that stuck in me with my, because at the time I was thinking, oh my gosh, what a great metaphor for what leaders have to do is, okay, here's the race I've mapped out for my day. I step into my school, and what happens? You get knocked straight down in the snow. I mean, you're just like whatever it is that you've got to deal with that day. And what I've just, when I was younger, what would happen to me is it would knock me down. And then the whole rest of the day, that's all I could just deal with. Even if maybe I resolved the issue, I'm still ruminating on it, or I have to debrief about it, or I have to keep talking about it, or I have to go complain to somebody about it, or whatever it is. But at some point, I started having to just like tell myself, switch your focus. Like, okay, you've dealt with this. Now look back at that calendar, and what were the things that I said I was going to do today? Go do those, because those things are still there, and I still want to win this race. And so, I don't know. For me, that's a healthy perspective check.
Yeah, I'll add one last thing to that. As a former basketball coach, we used to tell our players to play the next play.
There you
Just
go.
play the next play, because sometimes things are going to go wrong. You're going to have a turnover. You're going to miss a shot. You're going to foul somebody you didn't intend to foul, or maybe you did intend to foul, but there are going to be things that didn't go well. And if you keep living in the past and living in that moment, it just hinders how effective you can be moving forward. So just continue, just play the next play, play the next play. So that reminded me of that.
Oh, I love it that you said that, because I love sports analogies too. Because sometimes I think about, especially when you're on a really good team and you start, I call it working in the zone. When everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're really flowing, and you're kind of hitting those marks together, it does feel like sports in a way. It feels like it just feels like when everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're keeping that kind of focus and that kind of mindset, then it's also kind of fun, David, when you get to be on a team like that too, where you realize like everybody's working together to take care of kids and get learning done here. So it doesn't have to just be stressful. It can also be, there's also can be a lot of joy.
I agree. So, Will, let's switch over. Let's talk about your book a
Mm,
little bit.
yeah.
Whose permission are you waiting for? An educator's guide to doing what you love. I shared with you before we started recording. I've read it, and it is fantastic.
Mm.
And I'm going to tell you the effect that it had on me, because I don't think I've ever read a book that had this effect on me. So I would read a chapter, and it would motivate me so much that I wanted to put the book down so that I could do what it was coaching me to do. But then I would read the first page of the next chapter, and then I wouldn't put it down. And then I would think, I don't know if I took enough notes. I'm going to forget what I was going to do at the end of the last chapter. So it just literally was like that the whole time. Like, put the book down and do what it's coaching me to do, and plan and think and be creative, and think about my profession, and really cool things that I could do within it that I haven't even thought about. But then I don't want to put the book down, so I'm going to read the next chapter first. So that's about the best compliment I think I could give a book. It was excellent.
Thank you so much. You're motivating me, because we will be working on a study guide to go with this too. So because we did that with my last book, so leaders could do exactly what you do, read it, but then maybe read it with somebody else, and then take time to like sit down and just really flesh out some of those actions that come up, David. So thank you. You're motivating me to get that work done.
Awesome. Yeah, it will definitely help. So can you give us maybe the 30,000 foot view, just to
Yeah,
kind of the elevator pitch in a
sure.
nutshell what the book's about?
Yeah, this was a book I wrote based on a lot of the coaching I've done over the last 3 years with highly effective leaders that reach out to me who are already doing extraordinary work, but are just wrestling with either a really hard decision that's sitting right in front of them where they need somebody on the other side of them, or maybe even wrestling with their own career paths. So I tried to write this book for both the young educator, the veteran educator, but I just found myself saying the same things over and over again these last few years. And I realized, oh, this is what happened with my past books. When I find myself saying the same things over and over again, I need to write this down and make it a resource. So a couple of years ago, I just took time to write down what are the main things I find myself coaching leaders in. And that didn't take me long. I brainstormed 20 different areas that became the chapters of this book. So just how to think about the complexities in front of you in ways that don't isolate it down to just binary decisions, how to create pathways for yourself when you're thinking about potential options in front of you. But then also just some of the reflective practices that I've learned over time that help you to stay centered and focused, and help you decide maybe what you need to do next. So, and then of course the title of the book, "Whose Permission Are You Waiting For?" is really the heart of this book, which is a lot of times when you take time to reflect and really understand where you are and what you need to do next. What I found is sometimes leaders are still waiting for somebody to give them a green light, and I'm like, you are the green light. Give yourself permission. You don't need to keep waiting for someone else's permission. If you know that there's something really valuable that needs to happen right in front of you, whose permission are you waiting for? It's usually it's your own. So give yourself permission to do that next thing that you know is going to create value.
Awesome. So you mentioned a minute ago not narrowing yourself down to binary decisions, and that was one of the things that I wanted to pull out. And I'll say beforehand, there were several things in the book, and this is a good example where I would read the concept, and then I could apply it to my professional life as an individual. I could apply it to my personal life as an individual, and I
Mhm.
could also apply it to like a leadership group, like if I my leadership team or my staff. There were lots of those, and this was one of them. It talked about during the decision making process, whatever decision you're trying to make, not to think beyond just choice A or choice B. And you even mentioned a term, and I want to give these guys credit. Uh,
Mhm.
Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, who were design engineers at Stanford, and the term was Odyssey planning, which I thought
Mhm.
was a really cool term. So, like I said, that type of thinking becomes a theme throughout the book. So, can you talk a little bit about that mindset change from binary decisions to seeing beyond that?
Yeah, man, this has been so helpful for me. So it's hard to explain it succinctly. So thank you for bringing that out of the book. Um, because years ago, I found myself, when I was wrestling with really hard decisions, doing what a lot of people do, create your pro and con list, and here's A options, here's B's options. And I don't know, but at some point, I found myself, because I like to think tactically too, I found myself taking big giant post-it notes and putting them on the walls of my office. And I would just write out, okay, here's option A. Here's all the pros and cons and the different pathway things that could happen. Here's option B. Here's all the, and then at one point I started creating a C, and then
Mhm.
I even started adding a D, and I was like, what would happen if maybe we went like we had three or four different options and we considered what those things look like. And I didn't realize that had a name until I came across this book by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans called called Designing Your Life, I think is what it's called. I may have the title wrong because it's not right in front of me. But their book, they're design engineer professors from Stanford who created an elective course for students because guess what, David? They were having the same conversations with these really highly achieving Stanford students that we have with people all the time. And I think I had this conversation almost every week with somebody who still doesn't know what they want to do when they grow up. And it seems like it's that way for everybody. And so they were like, why is it so hard for people to decide that next thing? So they took the same concepts that they used in design engineering and they created an elective course helping students to explore the possibilities of what's in front of them in a pathway thinking like you would do as a design engineer. And the idea is this: whenever you give yourself more than two options, then you open up the possibilities for looking for exploring each of those pathways and looking for maybe people that are experts in those areas that could help you understand it better, maybe other resources you could pull in to help you understand that pathway better, And I call them also looking for open doors or opportunities within those pathways that could help you make those decisions a little bit better too. It also just kind of pulls you away from always thinking that your options have to be A or B, because sometimes there could be a hybrid option that gives you a solution that you're looking for too. It's really hard to apply this unless I know what it is the person's wrestling with. But if somebody's listening to this right now and there's a challenge that you're setting on right now, and you can say, this is the real challenge here for me, then the question that I would ask you is, what do you want? But let's define that what you want in more than one or two ways, maybe three ways, and then give yourself permission to explore those what you want options as pathways and see which one of those may become the pathway that's the most attractive to you.
Yeah, I often talk about when I'm in a difficult decision or when I'm coaching someone in a difficult decision. I use the magic wand question.
Mm,
If you had a magic wand and it could turn out exactly like you want it to turn out, what would that result look like?
that's a great
And
question.
many times I don't know why, but our minds are under stress and we don't even think about that. We're we're
Yes.
we're not thinking that far out. Many times your magic wand answer, most of it or not, or almost all of it, maybe all of it, is actually possible. So I just think it's so valuable to start there and then back your way into, well, what are the steps that I would have to take to get to that? Who are the people that I would have to engage who have expertise in that area? Many of the things that you just said.
That's so true because when you ask that question, what do you want, or the magic wand question, what you're doing is you're imagining the solution that's the most ideal. Then, if you can imagine that, then backward map from there. Because
Mhm.
so often we get caught up in the what's right in front of us that we can't even imagine the ideal solution. But once you can imagine the ideal solution, then you can begin blueprinting the possibilities to get yourself there. And it's usually going to be more than one way to get there.
That's right. No, I agree. And as I said before, you can use that skill, uh, making a tough decision on the job one day in your school or district. You can help your leadership team or other groups that you're working with to think that way. But you can also use that in your personal life or in your career as you're thinking
Yes.
about, my Odyssey journey. What's my Odyssey journey going to look like through my career, and what other options might I have? And that's something I know you touch on in the book as well.
Hmm.
Um, so let's switch over. I want to talk a little bit about mastermind
Hmm.
sessions. I know this is something that you do as part of your consulting.
Yeah.
It's also something that's in the book. And I just think it's such a simple concept, but yet a very innovative and collaborative concept. I went to a conference just a couple months ago, and I saw on the agenda that they were having mastermind sessions for a certain period of time. That's the first time I had ever heard that term.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to go to day one of the mastermind, but I went to day two, and it was wonderful. And then when you and I started talking, and you mentioned mastermind sessions, I just think it's a really cool thing. So, can you talk to us a little bit about it?
Yeah, several years ago, a good friend of mine, Danny Bauer, who has a podcast called Better Leaders, Better Schools, and has provided me with some coaching in the work I do now. Um, he and then another friend of mine, Jethro Jones, both began to invite people to masterminds with them that were being held virtually. And there are business models of this, but in the education circles that I've been in, I've seen some universities invite people into these kinds of things, in the health industry as well as education. The National Association of Secondary Principals now hosts their own masterminds for different, rural principals or urban principals or suburban principals or women leaders. The concept is giving yourself permission to meet regularly with another group of like-minded leaders. And by like-minded, I don't mean all the same. I just mean everyone has a commitment to growth. And when I lead sessions of masterminds, we usually have some common content that we're all reading together so that when we pull together, we can spend a few minutes just talking about what did you learn from the content that we're all sharing and reading together. But then ultimately, what you want to be able to do is transition it over. We always invite one person in the group to bring a hot seat issue, something that they're really wrestling with. And then we provide collective coaching. So we and I train in my masterminds how to ask probing questions and clarification questions, how to paraphrase, how to do follow-ups. So we do questions long before we ever get to suggestions. And once we've gotten to through the questions and we go to suggestions, the mastermind gives an opportunity for the room to be the smartest person there, because I just love to say the smartest person in this room is the room.
Hmm.
And so man, what's been powerful for me, David, is years ago when I was first thinking about consulting and coaching and people would ask me for a meeting, I would feel this burden like I always had to have the answer. And then I started realizing at some point, no, my goal here is to be a safe place for reflection, because usually the person has the answer. They just need someone who can reflect with them long enough so they can land on that next thing. But the power of doing it with a group is it's not just one-on-one reflection. Then you've got all these amazing people who can provide additional ideas and additional resources and additional experiences. And so masterminds have just become a great way for me to collectively reflect with leaders on a regular basis. And I learned so much through doing that, David. I mean, I know I host those masterminds, but man, I get as much out of them as anybody else.
What I really like, I like so much about that concept. But the thing that I like, I in my career, I've often said if you can get the right people in the right room at the right time, talking about the right thing, you can solve almost any problem.
Mhm.
What I love about what you're describing, it's that, but it is also meeting on a regular basis so that we
Mhm.
become this cohort, this support structure where we're coaching each other on a regular basis, and that's a whole other level. I love that.
Mhm.
So, Will, there's a chapter in your book called "Finding Your Greatest Joy Is Not What You May Think," and I really like that title. It certainly made me want to read it. Okay, well, what is it if it's not what I think? Um, it talks about the fact that choosing a career in education for a lot of us is a calling. It's something that we feel led to do. And our decisions in work bring us the most joy when our values and our work are intertwined. So it's like in education, it's one of those fields where you can have your career, but you can also live out sort of your mission
Mhm.
um, in life. And so it's really important for us to do work that resides within our values. So, what are any advice you can give on how you find that sweet spot between our values, our work, and then our pursuit of joy?
What a great question. And this is just something I have to revisit over and over and over again, David, because I think that there's this, um, and I don't think this is just Western or just American. I think it's human. I think there's this tendency in all of us to be dreaming, planning, pursuing the next thing, because there's a lot of joy in whatever that next thing is you're building. We all love to create something new, a new experience, a new project, a new adventure. If it's a career choice, maybe it's that you're you're good at what you're doing, but you're thinking about that next area where you could grow and find joy. But there's so on the one hand, I want to encourage people to stay hungry, because I think curiosity and hunger are all a part of just that. It's what makes being a person such a wonderful experience, is just that constant learning that you can engage in as a person, to be a full person and complete. But I also, on the other hand, want to warn people that if you think that that next thing is going to be what fulfills you or what defines you or what gives you value, then man, you're setting yourself up for disappointment,
Yeah.
because none of us is going to find our fulfillment or our value or our identity in that next thing if you're not already finding joy and value and completeness where you are right now. Now, there may be somebody listening right now like, well, you don't know where I'm at right now. Where I'm at right now is toxic and horrible, and I don't want to be what I am right now. And I understand that there are some situations and some stages in life and some seasons that are harder than others. And sometimes environment does make a difference. And sometimes moving to a different school or a different position or whatever can remove you from a situation that's traumatic or toxic. And so if you're in a situation that's just unhealthy to be in, then by all means, moving out of that situation may very well be one of the best things you could do. Um, but the bigger picture that I'm trying to make sure that I cover in that chapter is just even in my own work, as I have come up against that next thing. What's the next thing I'm going to do? Or maybe I'm invited to consider a promotion. When I've really wrestled with these things, David, and I'm a person of faith, so I take my biggest decisions, obviously, I go to God in prayer. And several years ago, I just really was reminded as I was looking at a really hard decision that if I'm not finding my greatest satisfaction and in my joy in my relationship with God, in my relationship with my family, and who I am apart from my work, then that work is not going to satisfy me.
That's
So it
right.
really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what my job title is. And sometimes when you've got big choices in front of you, it may not be that the most important thing is should I do this or should I do that? The most important thing is where am I finding my greatest joy?
Hmm.
And so for me, that's why that importance of holding on to those values should be important, whatever you're pursuing.
Wow, that's great. And we could preach. I could get started as well because I just think there's so much having peace in your heart is beyond what your external situation is, and I go in prayer as well. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for the book, but thank you for that chapter in particular. So I have one more question and then a small follow up because this was just another before we wrap up. This was another really interesting thing that stuck with me. In the book, you talk about I don't know if it's 10x thinking or if it's 10 times thinking. So my question is, how can it be important for a leader, for both himself or herself, or also leading a team, to consider 10x or 10 times thinking?
I'm so glad you asked that question too. So there's this concept that's been around in the business world for a while, which is to think beyond how could you multiply the amount of outcome or value or what or profit in businesses, you know? So I I reference an author in the book that's been helpful for me in that chapter, but I'll take you back several years before that, which is and you know I've talked about this too. You know, I grew up in Northwest Tennessee on a small farm. My dad was in and out of the military. I talk about this in my third book, maybe not in this one, but it wasn't until I was a teacher that I realized when I was helping kids fill out the free and reduced lunch forms that I was like, "Oh, wait a second. What are title funds?" And then I realized, "Oh, I was the recipient of the title funds that schools get to help kids with free and reduced lunches or extra tutoring." And so my mind went all the way back to when I was a little kid and I used to get pulled out for extra reading tutoring, or when I would get my free and reduced little, you know, card to carry to lunch so that I could get my free lunches. And I didn't realize, I mean, it's just like this little light bulb went off in my head how poor I was growing up until I became a teacher and then realized how poor I was growing up. And I'm not saying that as like a complaint. I had a rich, wonderful life, and the amazing part was my parents and my teachers didn't treat me like I was a poor kid who needed free and reduced lunches. They they helped me believe I could do anything, and they just treated me with dignity and respect, and gave us this sense of you can accomplish whatever you put your mind to. But there was also a limit on the amount of exposure, experience, understanding of the world that I had because of just the limits of where I lived and how I grew up. And so, even as I became an educator and then later a school leader, and I began looking at you know, you mentioned I started a blog, I started a podcast, I started writing books. This idea of what is it that's right in front of you at the moment? And have you ever imagined what it would look like if what you're doing could be multiplied? Maybe the influence you're having, or the value you're creating, or the people that you're touching. And so at some point years ago, I started playing around with these ideas. This would be another thought experiment that you would see on the walls of my room, where I would just think, okay, what would happen if I was able to, like I'll say in the work I'm doing now, what would happen if I was able to reach this many people with the message that I'm trying to reach this year? Or maybe it's in school. What would happen if instead of trying to reach 80% proficiency in this area with student learning, we shot for 100? You know, what would it take for us to actually apply practices to that kind of imaginative outcome? And so my invitation in this chapter about 10x thinking and multiplying your thinking is an invitation to get out of your own head and the limitations that often exist in in the goals that we set. And so, David, there's two sides to this coin. You can on the one side, it can open up a world of possibilities to you that you've never imagined if you give yourself permission to start thinking about growth, and outcomes and impact like 10 times the amount that you're currently doing. It can also be paralyzing because you're just like, oh, this is just overwhelming. I can't do that. My brain can't do that. So what I try to do in the book is just invite people to, first of all, invite them to permission to think like that. But then the practical side of it is usually that kind of thinking forces you to realize how much you need to collaborate, because
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of exponential growth and the kinds of goals that you really would love to see happen, whether it's at school or personally or within your life or career, almost can never happen when you are completely dependent on your own mind and your own experience. And so, man, anytime I've ever seen that kind of exponential growth happening in my work or my life, it's usually when I'm pulling others together and saying, oh man, I've been thinking about this, but I don't know how to do it. And so, how can we begin to collaborate together to reach those kinds of goals? So, yeah, so that chapter is an invitation to leaders to just really think big.
Love it. Will, this has been so fun. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about? And after you do that, can you let our listeners know how they can keep up with you and connect with you and learn more from you?
Yeah. Well, I guess as we wrap up, I just want to say that a lot of times when I'm working with leaders, I like to wrap up by saying two things. One sounds unkind, and the other one will be kind. The unkind thing is we are not as important as we think we are.
Mhm.
So often when we have the title leader or whatever role we're playing, we think, man, this school could never exist without me, or this district could never run without me. Well, guess what? Someday it will. Someday it
Yeah.
will. Someday you'll be a picture on some wall and somebody will be like, who's that? So it's a call to remain humble in this work, that someday this work will go on without you. But then the thing number two is this: you are so much more important than you think you are, because the moment that you're in, the place that you're in right now, today, you have the opportunity to make someone's life better, to influence someone to do something they never could have done before, to inspire them to think things about themselves. All those things that I talked about, I grew up believing about me was because teachers believed in me and because
Mhm.
my family invested in me. And so you are so much more important than you think you are, because somebody today, a child or another leader or a staff person or a parent, needs somebody to encourage them to believe in and hold on to hope and to have the support that they need to do the things that they're dreaming of. So I just think that for leaders, it's important that we keep both those truths. We hold both of we hold on to both of those truths at the same time, because if you're going to give yourself permission to do the thing that you love, you need to realize that your impact is important today,
Mhm.
and it's going to be important long after you're gone because of the investment that you've made in the lives of others. And if you want to stay connected with me, the easiest way is my website, williamdparker.com, because there I have you have access to my podcast episodes, to my other resources, to my books, or you can sign up for my newsletter. So williamdparker.com is the easiest way to stay connected with me.
Very good. Will, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so that's going to wrap us up. Once again, I'd like to thank Will Parker for joining EdVantage today. A little note, I will also be on Will's podcast, Principal Matters, in a few months, and I can't wait for that episode to come out. In the meantime, I want to encourage you to consider supporting Will's work by purchasing a copy of one of his books, specifically the most recent one, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? by listening to Principal Matters, joining a mastermind group, or having Will in your school or district. So thanks again for tuning in to EdVantage today. Until next time, I hope you have a great week. Take care.